So in this video, we're going to show you how to use this Pace Technologies TerraPress TP7001, which is a hot mounting machine. So that's what we have here. Right now, it is in the off position, so I'm going to show you how to start this up. And all the information that you're going to need to operate this is in a binder that we have, which is the user manual, and this will be right beside the machine. So if you go to the first page that we have highlighted, it'll show you this startup procedure. So the main thing that we're going to do right now is we're going to start the machine, turn the machine on, and so that's here in the back right. And you'll see the control panel light up, and so it is on. Next, we want to make sure that we have air for the hydraulics, and so the air should be in the up position, like you see there, and you should be getting a reading of between 80 and 90 psi on the gauge. So the air is on now, and also we need water for the cooling, and so we'll turn on the water faucet back here, which is hooked up to a filter and to the machine. So that will allow us to cool the sample after the heating run is done. So that's how we're going to start this up, and then we'll take a look at loading the sample and so forth. So now we're ready to actually set the hot mount up for your sample run. And in the manual, in the section 4.5, there's a whole list of tables for what type of mounting material and the size. This is a 1 1/4 inch mount, so we're going to use that size. And the mounting material we have is a phenolic material, and so I'm going to use that table. If you have another material, there's other tables for those materials, but we're going to start with phenolic. And so for that, it says we need 200 Celsius temperature. We need 80 to 90 pressure for the hydraulics. We need a time of minimum of 10 minutes and 16 grams of our phenolic powder. So we're going to go with that, and I'm going to show you the setup procedure and how to set this. So if we want to change any parameters, we're going to go to set, and then this will change up here, and it says H, and this should be a T. This is the heat temperature, and so we can set it down here. It's already set to 200, but if we need to adjust, we can move these up and down or move side to side. And so we can switch to whatever temperature that we would like, but I actually want 200. So then if I hit set again, this is CT, so this is the cooling temperature, and it's set to 30. If you want a different temperature that you want to cool to, then that is where you set that. Same thing, up and down, and then shift over to go to the different digits. And if it zoned out there for a second, so I'll go back. So the third option is lowercase h t. So this is the hold time. So right now, again, it's set to 10 minutes, but if we needed to adjust that, we could do that with these arrows that we have here. Next thing, CT. So this is the cooling time. There's different methods for cooling, and I'll show you that in a second. But if we want to cool it for a certain amount of time, we set that here. So this is 12 minutes. Same thing, we can set it in the same way. This Alt is actually the buzzer, so you don't have to mess around with this. This just tells you when it's done, and that's really all the set parameters that we need to know. So right now it's set up to run so it'll heat up to 200 degrees Celsius. It will hold for 10 minutes, and it will cool to 30 degrees, or it will do it based on another parameter. So right now we have it set. If you look up here, it says cooling, and then temperature is highlighted. If we want to set by, so this will, when it detects that the internal temperature is 30 degrees, it will shut down. If we have it set for time, it will cool, run the water for 12 minutes, and then it will stop. Or you can do it manually, which is just constantly running, so you can probably hear that right now. We have found that the best way to do this is by time. Temperature, what happens is it tends to get down to 30 degrees, and then it'll shut off the water, and it'll go back up in temperature. So we like to do it for 12 minutes. We found that that is a good way to cool these samples. So we are all set. We've got everything programmed here. We don't have to mess with the force. This is the force gauge. That should be set by the air. So unless you don't see it between 80 and 90, do not worry or do not try to set this. And then the last kind of couple things that I want to show you on the screen is the RAM up down, and then obviously the run stop. So this is the last thing we're going to do. But the RAM up down actually moves the bottom of the bottom piston and allows us to take the sample in and out of that. So we'll be using that in a second, but that's controlled by the hydraulics. Basically moves our sample up and down. So we'll get to that in a second. So that's basically all of the controls that you're going to need to set up this. So we're all set to go. We'll come back here in a second and put a sample in and run it under those conditions. All right, so now we've got it ready to go set here. I'm going to walk you through the steps you need to do to load your sample and all the way through to running it. So the first thing you want to do is just kind of inspect everything that's going to be in contact with the sample. So the metal RAM here, the sidewalls, and then the top enclosure. What can happen is the phenolics and other materials that you use can get stuck to here. So you might have to take a spatula or some type of like scraping implement and just kind of scrape off the little bits if you see them. So make sure it's always clean before you run it. And then after you're done, obviously for the next person, make sure that you clean off those same areas. So we'll look, so kind of make sure this part is clean, and then make sure the RAM is clean, and then we can also lower this, and then look inside the walls to make sure they're also clean as well. So everything looks good. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to raise it up. And so you can see it here again. So this is where the sample is going to go. But before we do that, the phenolic has a tendency to stick. And so we need to make sure that the same parts that come in contact with your sample and the walls are lubricated or have some type of releasing agent. And so we're going to use this mold release, and we're going to spray it on all the parts. So I will, and make sure nobody's around when you spray it, but make sure you coat all the parts, and make sure that you lower this and get the sidewalls in the bottom. And it'll dry pretty quickly. So once you're done with that, we're going to raise this back up. You see some of it might come off. And then we've got our sample here. It's in a clip so it stands up. So whatever face that we want to look at, we're going to place down. So I want to look at this one. Okay, a quick note on sample height. So you can't have super tall sample height or you will end up causing damage to the machine. So this is a mount that we have made with the 16 grams, and it is a little less than 3/4 of an inch. So to be safe, you should have your sample height less than 1/2 an inch. I think that's just a safe thing to do. So make sure your sample height is less than 1/2 an inch to put into this machine. If it's higher than that, you'll want to cut it down to size. And then to be able to put the phenolic powder in, we need to lower it again. So there's kind of a lot of raising and lowering the RAM. So when it's at the bottom, you'll hear that hissing stop. And so we're going to put the funnel here, and we've got our 16 grams of phenolic powder weighed out. And then I'll just kind of inspect it and make sure it looks good. We've got everything in. We've got the sample powder and the release agent in. So the next thing we need to do is add this top RAM. And so it has screw threads. So what we're going to do is place it on top. And then we have to push down, and then we turn it clockwise. So that will thread it on to the top. so that we can apply pressure. All right, so again, you have to press down quite hard and then turn clockwise, and it will start to activate. It'll get on the screws, and then you'll feel some resistance, and you keep turning until you reach the bottom. So at this point, I can't turn anymore, so I'm going to leave it there. So at this point, what we're going to do is there's no force on the machine right now because the ram is all the way to the bottom. So when I hit the run stop button, it's going to start the procedure, and so it's going to move up, and so you should start to hear that, and then it'll start to heat up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. And so here the heating is blinking. So along the process of this run, it'll tell you where it is. So it's in the ready, and then heating, and then it's holding, cooling, and then it's complete. So you can kind of track the progress with these lights. And the actual temperature is up here, so you can see that it's already increasing in temperature.